Please be seated. So here we all are in this hot midsummer, and the temperature probably is going to go up 10 degrees while you're in here, so be prepared for the journey out. It's also been a morning when the fire alarm system has been unusually random. So if you hear beeping from the back, we have our Duke intern back there ready to press buttons randomly to turn it off, and it sort of works. Some of us, we come to church, some of us feel that our lives are pretty okay, they're going along pretty well, and maybe some of us feel like the world's going along pretty well enough. And some of us come to church and we feel like our lives on a personal level have some really big challenges. Things aren't okay with us, and maybe we feel that the world really isn't going along okay. But we all come to church, and we come, I think, for lots of reasons, but in general, we come seeking some kind of connection. We want to be connected to ourselves. We want to be connected to each other. We have a community to be connected with. We want to be connected to God that comes through being connected with ourselves and indeed with each other. A community that is holding God is a space where we can connect more fully with God. So we come today, we're seeking connection, we're perhaps seeking some grounding, a sense of how to walk in this world, like how to actually be a human being in our lives, how to live in a way that our souls can say yes to, our souls are happy with, so we feel connected all the way down in our bodies, not just frantically running around and getting stuff done, but really whole. We seek all of that when we come. And as I've gotten to know people more and more in the church, we have conversations, I discover you're all a lot like me in the sense that you might have a lot of uncertainty about this, a lot of doubt about this. Like, is this really going to help? Is church actually going to do something for me and with me? Is it going to have that sense of connection with my soul, my deep self, with other people and soul? Is it going to be about God? Does the gospel really do that? Does the sacraments, does the church actually, is it going to be valuable? And this is especially true at times of testing, at times of suffering, when things don't feel well at all in our lives. And we begin to wonder, is God even there? Is all this church talk just kind of play acting, something we hope is kind of good, but we don't have any experience of? Is it real? So I'd like to take all of that today, all our desires for connection with each other, soul, God, and all our doubts and our questions, and bring it into conversation with the gospel that we just heard. And this gospel, you'll note, has two sections. They're really divided. In the first section, Jesus is talking about the village and the calling down fire on them and Jesus rebuking the disciples. That's all about Jesus actually showing up in the world in a new way, as a new kind of offering of how God is in the world, and different from all the other worldly powers. All the worldly powers around us are trying to offer us some way of salvation. And Jesus is coming in a totally different, non-coercive, powerless way. We'll talk more about that. And then the second half of it is in the call, the cost of discipleship. It appears that if Jesus is the free offering of God in the world, just walking around in our lives, offering all that God is to us freely and without cost, it appears that following Jesus is going to cost not less than everything. And that's a paradox that we kind of have to hold in tension. The offering is totally free. But to receive the offering and to allow it to change our lives means we have to be ready to let go of everything. The cost of discipleship. So let's look at that first part of the gospel. Jesus has set his face towards Jerusalem. He knows his time is up. And in this second half of Luke's gospel, he knows he's going to die. He's going to be a totally failed Messiah in terms of this world. He's not going to bring about the kingdom at all. He's going to be rejected. He is going to be a failure. He's going to be crucified. He's going to die. That's what it means when he sets his face toward Jerusalem. He's actually accepted that as his destiny, and he's walking in that direction. So some of what Jesus is about is he is in this place of complete self-surrender, of letting go of his life to this, letting go of his life to manifest the kingdom now in this world. So they're going from Galilee through Samaria to Jerusalem, and the Samaritans don't like the Jews. So when they hear that this party is going to Jerusalem, they reject them and don't give them a place in their village. And this is all very tribal. I don't think it's anxiety about Jesus and the powers that be. I just think it's tribal stuff. Samaritans don't like Jews. Jews don't like Samaritans. We're not going to give this guy a place for tonight. We don't like that. We don't do that. Tribal identity, tribal rejections. And then you get that great line of James and John saying, Lord, let's call down fire from heaven. Let's burn these people to a crisp. And I felt like that this morning when the fire alarm system kept going off. I'm like, burn. Not really. That's the next metaphor, I guess. But, they felt what? They felt like they had lost their standing. They've been rejected. They've been dismissed. So let's use our power, our closeness to God to just eradicate and destroy these people. Let's call down fire from heaven on them. And Jesus rebukes them, it says, and goes a different way. And this rebuke is so important. It is so vital to hear this rebuke and to understand what it's about. I think James and John, they had the idea that being close to Jesus means I'm close to God. Well, that's true. Yay. Ka-ching. They got that right. We think they got that right. Being close to Jesus is being close to God, and then we're on this victory march to Jerusalem, and being close to God means that we have God's power on our side, and we can use God to get rid of anybody who opposes us. In other words, this is very peculiar because they're turning God into a worldly power just like every other worldly power, and it's all about rivalry and competition in violence to make the world a kind of world for us. So they're using God and thinking of God as a power alongside other worldly powers. And they're trying to call in that power to destroy the people who apparently oppose it. But Jesus' rebuke says that being close to God means being rendered almost powerless in this worldly competition for power. No longer in rivalry with the powers of this world to make this world like we want it entirely, but yet still very powerful to manifest the kingdom. It's a very tricky thing. We're still very powerful because we can actually represent God to one another, and we can open God's kingdom and make a place for God's flourishing to happen and people's flourishing to happen. But it's not in rivalry with this worldly powers where we assume we have God to come down and smite our enemies. God doesn't smite, as far as I know. We're powerful in extending to others, as Jesus did, this full belonging to God. Belonging and worth and purpose. Now, this image arrived in my mailbox about a month or two ago. It's from the cover of the magazine from the Southern Poverty and Law Center. And I was so struck by it, I've been sitting with it for weeks now. And seems a mother and a child. There's tenderness and delight. There's enclosure. There's love. There's dignity. And this became for me an image of God, of who God is, what God does with us. You could have God and us. This could be Mother Church and us. That kind of cherishing. And when I saw this, I was struck and I said, what if this represented not only who God is and how God is with us, but the highest aspiration and the highest value of human society? What if this represented the greatest good for human beings, not only to know God and to receive what God gives in that way, but then to wonder about sharing that with others, sharing this with others. This cherishing, this delight, this tenderness, this strength. What if that's who God is? What if we can know that? What if we can, knowing that, share that with others? What if we can do things in our communities that make this more likely to arise for everybody? What if we can make decisions with how we are together where this is the highest value? What about that? Receiving the delight of God, the strength of God, the tenderness of God, sharing that with each other, and then making decisions in our community such that this becomes more possible for everyone. You know, and as we do that, if this is your highest values, if this is what God looks like, and I think it does for me, then you begin to realize, oh my gosh, I spent my whole life worshiping idols. If this is where God brings worth and dignity and life, I've been trying to find that through success. I've been trying to find that through power, political power, worldly power. I've been trying to find that through maybe hanging on to my youth for as long as I can. I've been worshiping power and money and youth and health and celebrity. All the things we look up to in our society. All the things we aspire to. What if this represents the highest aspiration and the highest human good? And what if we start sharing that with each other and start making small communities where this can become more likely? That's what I wonder. That is what I'm really curious about. Now, the disciples didn't understand this as the heart of Jesus. Because if they understood this as the heart of Jesus, when they got rejected for being with Jesus, they would not have tried to call down fire from heaven to destroy those who rejected them. Because you don't bring about the kingdom of God by destroying your enemies. And you might not ever really bring it about, right? Jesus didn't have a success in bringing it about in his lifetime. But what we can do is we can walk around and manifest that in moments where we realize, my God, that is what heaven feels like. That is what it feels like to be human. That's what it feels like to be connected with soul and with you and with God. Maybe we can do that in some small ways. And that is our power from on high as Christians, to respond to God in ways that lets like the present moment open up to be a place where God is. And it's because the disciples didn't get that, and their outrageous idea of calling down fire from heaven, God's power to destroy people, that I think Luke had this second section in the gospel about the call to discipleship. Because this is not how the world works. This isn't how the world is operated. And if we take this as our highest value, well, then guess what? We no longer have a home in the world. We no longer have a place, a nest, a den like foxes and birds have. We are in some way strangers in this world. We become, in the words of Hauerwas, resident aliens. We become ambassadors for a different kingdom, just showing up, just walking around like a bunch of naive fools, like the last act in the circus, as St. Paul says. We just show up to offer momentarily the kingdom. We show up to offer this. Having known it, we can share it, if just for a moment. So, when we hear those things from Jesus about let the dead bury their dead, and you can't even say goodbye to your family, it all sounds really extreme, like, oh my gosh, why am I called to leave my family and go be a missionary somewhere, or, And then we hear that and we're like, ugh, I'm just going to go have lunch, right? It's just too much, right? And so we idealize it so much, we don't even think about, like, how can this be in my life? I mean, how could this become more a part of my life? How do I answer the call to be a disciple of Jesus, bringing his heart into our world? So we need to bring these calls to discipleship right down into the practical and the concrete. And I want to ask you two things. If we want to follow Jesus, like if we want to be people who show this, who walk around naively and foolishly offering this to the world, two things. First, daily prayer. Like not prayer when you've traveled 2,000 miles to the national park and are up on the mountaintop and the sun comes over and the bear comes from behind. Not prayer in special moments, but just showing up every day to say, here is my life, God. I need to be held. I need to be cherished. I need you. I love you. Just a daily practice of prayer, showing up for better, for worse, for sickness, for health, so that we can receive something of God's cherishing and God's goodness. And then, just practicing it in the next human encounter. So Jesus is saying, come, follow me, come alongside. You can't even say goodbye to your family. You got to let the dead bury their dead. I am so important. Follow me. And that's the point where we tune out, right? We're just like, ugh, I'll go have lunch, like I said. That's where we tune out. I can't do that. But what if you did that in your next encounter with a person? If you turned away from all the dead ways of our lives, if you turned away from all the things that occupy you otherwise, and just for the space of this encounter, made your sole intention to show a person what God looks like. What if we prayed daily, opening our lives to God? What if we challenged all the idols that try to control us endlessly? What if we just practiced showing the world what God looks like, having to turn away from every other thing just for the moment of this encounter? I'm trying to show what God looks like. And maybe it looks like this. Maybe it doesn't look like fire from heaven. Maybe it looks like this. So in conclusion, we come right back to the start. We've all come here this morning with personal lives where things are well and unwell, a world that is so rapturously beautiful and where there's a lot of unwellness. And we come seeking God, we come seeking some kind of connection or grounding. And what is happening in the gospel today is an invitation to follow Jesus in his way of offering God to this world. First, receiving it in lives of prayer and devotion and community, and then practicing the next relationship, the next encounter, and maybe just practicing it once a day, and then maybe twice a day. It's like receiving the delight of God, sharing the delight of God, and making communities where this becomes more possible for more people. Amen.